Excellent. The recording has begun, and I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Sipple for our welcome.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and just more specifically that the seat, the nominating committee is, has recommended for Elizabeth Chadwick. There are now 3 Elizabeths, as we were saying this morning, and 1 Liz in this very meeting. Is the value-added processing, the on-farm value-added processing seat, which is Bob's seat, because Bob has fearlessly served 3 consecutive terms, and will be participating in symposiums and then transitioning into just being like our heroic continued reviewer, at least, right, Bob? Hopefully that's a yes.
That's correct.
But okay, great. But we'll be doing a full introduction of Elizabeth when the appointment is finalized. But it feels like, or for me, the presentations, so we're going to have 2 presentations today. One from the Farm and Forest Viability team, which today on this call is represented by Callie Hastings, Sam Smith, and Liz Gleason. And then we'll have a second presentation from Farm to Plate. And the timing of these presentations is really meant to set the board up with information that will be useful to the board as we go into the budgeting prioritization process that we engage in during the, really prior to and then finalized during the June board symposium. So, I see this as an opportunity for us to engage with folks who are looking across the landscape and who are working with, groups, organizations, businesses, day to day on the ground. So I invite, and I think the presentations are going to have some specific focus on recommendations that are pertinent to the board's budgeting process. So some focus on talking about needs and gaps that these networks are seeing. So timely presentations, please listen to the presentations with that in mind, that, are there things that we're hearing in these presentations that we want to flag for further conversation with the board around budgeting, right? Around like where we're allocating dollars. So that's the invitation. I guess the only other thing I will say is that in May, we'll be having a similar presentation from Vita. And we'll also be having a sort of a state of the state of dairy in the dairy sector, and an update on TSAG. So the trade show assistant grants that the board supports, with the same objective of making sure the board has the information, feels like we have the information and are informed going into our budgeting process, again, which happens at the June symposium. So I think, without further ado, I think it would be too timely for all board members to introduce themselves, unless somebody wants to, but I do feel like it might be nice, Callie and Sam. I think Liz, because you are a board member, there's really no need to introduce, but I would love to invite Callie and Sam to just briefly introduce themselves. And then, yeah, we're turning it over. Unless there's questions, I don't see any in the chat or any hands raised.
Yeah, that'd be great. We had planned to start that way.
Great.
I just put a little rough agenda for our section in the chat here. So yeah, Callie and Sam,
I'm happy to go.
jump in.
My name is Sam Smith. I am the Farm Business Director at the Intervale Center, and I have been doing farm business planning programming mostly through the Farm and Forest Viability Program funding for the past 13 years, I think. I've probably worked with hundreds of farms over that time. I also manage a team of 3 other full-time business planners. We work with about 120 plus farms a year, with farms stretching from concept to exit. And I personally do a lot of transfer planning and value-added business work with mid to large scale for Vermont businesses. We also manage the Vermont Land Link, which was just relaunched with Working Lands funding. And if you haven't checked out that website, that's a listing and linking service for farmers and farmland owners and farm seekers. It's sort of like online dating for farmers looking for land. Yeah, and I think I will leave it with that and turn it over to Callie.
Good morning. Yeah, nice to see everybody. I know some of you, but not everybody, so great to see some new faces. I'm the program manager for the Farm and Forest Viability Program at VHCB, and I came into this role from running a farm and food business with my family for about 18 years called Fat Toad Farm, which we sold 3 years ago. And I've been in this role for 4 years. And prior to that, when we were running Fat Toad Farm, we enrolled in the Farm and Forest Viability Program probably 10 or 12 years ago with Mike Gia. And we just had an amazing experience, and it changed the trajectory of our farm business at that time and really influenced our decision-making process. So it's something I've always valued. And then I did some consulting work over the years with the program as well when I was with Fat Toad Farm. We were also in the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund business coaching program at one point, which was also wonderful in helping us navigate our business and some pretty big decisions. And now I'm just doing this full time, and it feels amazing to have weekends. So I work mainly with the farms to get them farm, food, and forest businesses to get them enrolled in the program. So I do a lot of talking with folks to see if they're a good fit for our business planning and transfer planning services. If not, I'm often a resource to point people into other directions if we're not able to offer what they need. And part of my job is to work with a network of advisors throughout the state, delivering these services. So we have about 10 to 15 business advisors doing the Farm and Forest Viability Program on the ground at different organizations. And so I work very closely with them to do professional development work with them, get them connected with the businesses, get everyone enrolled and kind of on the same page, and staying up to date on what's going on in the environment around farming and forest businesses in the state. And I will leave it at that.
Thanks, Sam and Callie. Elizabeth Chadwick, I don't think we've met. I'm Liz. I'm the program director for the Farm and Forest Viability Program. I think just looking at the other folks on here, you're the only one I don't know. So glad to have you on the board.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
You too. This is getting over the top. It's like Elizabeth's and Sarah's are just running my life.
The Working Liz Enterprise Board.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, yeah, so we have till about 10. our plan is to just run through a couple slides with all of you just to give the overview of what the Farm and Forest Viability Program and Network is and what some of the results and stories are from that. And then share some feedback from Sam, from me and Callie. I have some notes from some other business planners that we work with that weren't able to be here, but we can share those. And then just have plenty of time for conversation and Q&A. You're also welcome to interrupt me at any moment. I'm going to put some slides up, but feel free to ask questions at any point. You don't need to wait till the end. I am going to sort of repurpose a presentation I did for Senate Economic Development a couple weeks ago, so apologies for the reuse, but it was just very efficient. All right, so I'm going to share some slides. Let's see how that goes. All right. Okay. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put it in present mode, which I actually haven't done in Teams yet, so please let me know if you can, like, you start seeing my horrifying email inbox or something like that.
Nope, that's great.
Great. All right. So just a really brief primer on what the Farm and Forest Viability Program is. So we were created in statute over 20 years ago, with the idea being that farmers were working really hard, had some resources in the state, but facing really intense market pressures, really strong challenges to profitability and success, an aging workforce, and the state came up with this idea for what was then called the Vermont Farm Viability Enhancement Program. We only worked with farms at the start, and the idea was to have some really skilled people doing in-depth business and financial planning with farms to increase their financial viability and their business sustainability. So really, from the very beginning, we've had a focus on that in-depth, individualized, one-on-one work with farms, and a really strong focus on financial management. So our primary goal is to try to work with businesses to help build their skills and help them become more successful, better able to meet their goals, more profitable, get them at the right scale in the right markets with the right products to meet the goals that they have and to work best with their land base and their skills. So we've been running this program for about 22-ish years. We are housed at the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, which is a larger organization that does a really holistic range of community development grant making. We fund a lot of different kinds of affordable housing, a lot of different kinds of land conservation, including a lot of agricultural land conservation. So this program we see as very complementary to that other work. And I'll get into this in a little bit more depth later, but we're a network-based program, a collaboration between a bunch of different organizations who all sort of came on board and said, we see the need for that kind of in-depth, individualized business management program too. We want to work on this with you together, and they apply to us for funding to run farm and forest viability within their own organization with their sort of particular skill sets, but it's a shared program model that we're all kind of managing and delivering together with lots of different farms. So just a couple stats. We're generally enrolling between 100 and 150 businesses a year in that really in-depth individualized work. We also, when funding is available, fund partner organizations to do other kinds of really needed business technical assistance, whether that's much lighter touch beginning farmer work or like a marketing plan or something like that. It's really all over the map based on people's needs. So we mostly, our primary focus and the reason this program started was that in-depth, individualized, long-term business planning. But we recognize that people come into this program in different ways. They need different things at different times, and we try to make funding available to have people doing other kinds of technical assistance to complement that. So this is just an example of a business we worked with in the last couple of years, Sunday Bell Farm in Danville. They worked with the Center for an Agricultural Economy, which has 2 farm business planners on staff. They are funded largely through farm and forest viability, but they also do other work, as does Sam and all the business planners we work with. We do succession planning, we do land access, we do a lot of like helping people figure out their numbers and make sure that they have really accurate financial information so they can make the best business decisions possible. It's really focused on those core skills of management. And just to get a sense of that scope, we are working with all sizes of farms other than like the early startups, though we do sometimes provide funding to do that kind of startup work too. But when someone like enrolls in the Farm and Forest Viability Program, that particular program model is best suited to someone who has a couple of years of financial data, a couple of years of management information, is at least a small commercial scale, and really has a lot of information to dig in and is at a key point in decision making. So we generally work with people who are grossing at least $15,000 in farm or forest business income, and up to like LFOs. So it's a pretty wide range. Last year, those 108 people we worked with represented 42 million in sales and over 300 jobs. So most of them are that slightly smaller business, like 1 to 5-ish employees, but we definitely work with some bigger businesses as well. Profitability is one of the key metrics of success, but definitely not the only one. Being able to meet goals, build skills, like all of those are really, really important to us. But I just did want to highlight this last bullet here around a 30% average increase in profitability. We looked at the last couple of years of data, and for most small businesses, profitability is really important because it represents what they can pay themselves in many cases, and whether the operators can continue to pay themselves any kind of living wage in order to make the business work for themselves and their family. So when we see those strong increases in profitability, it is very heartening. So I wanted to share that. All right. Why isn't my slide moving? Does anyone have any tips for me? I'm like pressing next and enter and the down button. Oh, here we go. Just a couple other metrics of success from last year. We do see a lot of people wanting to grow their businesses, so we'll help them with that. It's not everyone. Like some people actually feel like they need to shrink in order to be more profitable or make the business work better for them, but we do see a lot of strong growth. On average, people increase their sales by 45,000. We work with a lot of people to help them access the financing they need, whether it's loans or sometimes grants. So last year that was over 5.5 million that those 100+ businesses accessed. And as I've mentioned multiple times already, really focusing on that increased skill building. This is Honeyfield Farm in Norwich, which Sam has worked with over many years. We helped them look for land. Sam was like out there really looking at different parcels with them when they were renting and super small, and they were able to move on to a big established business and take it over and really run with it. About 5 or 6 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Do you want me to share a little bit more about them?
Yeah, let's pause for a story.
Yeah, so they, Eli and Valerie, they were both employees at other farms in the state, and they both knew that they wanted to farm full time. We worked with them. We got to them really early on, which is what we like to do with farm clients. And they were coaching clients where we taught them business management skills around developing financials. And then we went on to a structured land search. They eventually bought an established business in Norwich, Vermont. And the farm itself was sort of on the decline. The owners were aging and they had sold off some of the infrastructure already. And they actually were, because of the nature of the property, they weren't able to access financing for it at the time. And there was a land investment firm called Dirt Capital that came in and purchased the property for them. They were enrolled in farm viability during that startup period, which was also really rough because it was during COVID. And they grew from initial sales, I think, of about 150,000 in that first year. Last year they grossed about 700, a little over 700,000. And they're in the process of purchasing the property itself from Dirt Capital, which has a buy, lease, sell model. So I think they're a really great example. They employ probably 20 plus people seasonally with a few full-time year-round employees as well. So they're really, I think they got a working lands grant to do really significant infrastructure upgrades in terms of their processing and storage space, which is essential to the growth of their business. They do a pretty significant amount of wholesale sales, and for them to be able to grow, process, and hold product so that they can move it into these wholesale markets, it really has allowed them to meet the needs of those markets, both in terms of food safety and the timing of the product going into them. So they're a really wonderful example of a farm client that started with us very early on, built those business management skills, and then went through this progression that's pretty, it's pretty common for the types of new and beginning farm clients that we see. Liz, I'll pass it back.
Thanks, Sam.
Liz, I have a quick question before you move to your next slide, though, just about
Yeah,
the
sure.
45K, the increasing sales by 45K. Is there like a common linkage? Like, is it accessing new markets? Is it like, is there like or are there like what is the main
Yeah,
reason that the increased sales?
that's a great question. I'm going to pass that one to Sam since he's the one on the ground with businesses.
I think we used to joke in the farm viability community that our businesses often lost money in the second year of the program because they made so many changes in the first year of the program in trying to grow their business. I don't think that's actually the case. I think these numbers show that. But that would represent, a lot of our farmers are either looking to expand their business, expand into a new market, or even just enhance the current sales and market channels that they have. So one of the exercises that we often do is around looking at pricing and then per customer purchase rates. So if you're looking at basket size and farm stands, if we can, we encourage farmers to look at their pricing and do a comparison analysis like around whatever their competing markets are, and then adjust prices on an annual basis. We, oftentimes we'll find people are like, oh, I haven't raised my prices in 5 years. And it's sort of like, especially in this day and age, we try to introduce them the concept of raising their prices at least at the rate of inflation. And so that would indicate more higher level of gross sales. But we also have folks who are expanding into like value added, especially in dairy and maple. And then we also really encourage folks to access those higher margin direct markets. And if they have a really significant portion of their sales going to lower margin wholesale markets, trying to shift that over and capture more of the dollar within the local community, and actually increase their margins overall so they're more profitable.
Yeah. Thanks, Sam. Yeah, also note that looking at the last couple years of data around profitability, we certainly work with people who are losing money and in really come to us because they're in a really challenging financial situation. And it's a small percentage of our clients who are really in that sort of super intense straits. But when I looked at the last couple of years, I think it was around 2/3 of those people that we were able to sort of help move them through from actively losing a lot of money into profitability. So that's also something we really work on. And of course, there's like the most dire situations might require like something like bankruptcy proceedings, which we can also support people through and can be a really effective tool in those circumstances. So we're working with folks who are like really crushing it and need help to do an even better job. And we're also working with people who are in a really hard spot. I'm going to breeze through some of these next ones. But just wanted to say we work with all different kinds of farms and all different kinds of forest products businesses. I should have popped a chart in here for farms, but this is the forest one. Chris Lindgren is the primary forest business planner that we work with, and there's a couple other consultants that we'll also bring in. UVM is also hiring a new person who will be working on forest as well, but you can see it includes logging, woodworking, sawmills, sap and maple production. So all different kinds of forest businesses, all different kinds of farms, all different scales. We really make an effort to make sure that the network of organizations and service providers we work with can work with a really wide range of clients. So I'm going to hand it over to Callie for a sec to talk a little bit more about the network. But I just wanted to say one more time, she's going to describe like a little bit more about some of the people who we work with on this and the professional development that we do together. But just quickly wanted to say this top group of 5 organizations are the organizations that we've been working with together on the Farm and Forest Viability Program for almost 20 years. And they're the ones who are delivering like the really in-depth kind of like branded farm and forest viability program that someone would enroll and sort of know that they're doing the program. Each of these organizations has specific staff who are dedicated to that kind of work. We also know that a wide range and wide continuum of technical assistance is really important. So when we're able, with sufficient funding, we also put funding towards other programs that are either like working with people on the startup side or working with more growth stage businesses or doing really, really good marketing work. So this year that includes the Land Trust doing land access, Sustainable Jobs Fund with their sort of growth stage business coaching, Liberation Ecosystems working with BIPOC farmers, the Healthy Roots Collaborative providing marketing assistance, Northeast Forest doing a bunch of different forest business development, and then Food Connects doing sort of wholesale marketing, food safety type work. Callie, can you describe like the professional development piece a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, I would say we have a both unique and somewhat confusing model. So this is hopefully helpful to have it kind of laid out. And also just from a like, if you're out there in the field talking to businesses and you want to, or you're considering referring them to the program, and you don't really know exactly where to refer them to, you can always just refer them directly to us. Meaning Liz and I, or you could refer them to any one of those 5 listed under the service provider network, and they ultimately come through us in some way. But there can be confusion kind of across the state of who's done what and who's doing what viability program, and if they've worked with a business advisor before, was it part of this or not? So we're always kind of trying to fine tune that communication so people understand how the program works. So while it's a little confusing, it's also really awesome. The model, I think each of these partners has their own set of specialties. Everyone is like a great business advisor as a generalist, and then each advisor kind of has their own thing that they're like really, they have a ton of experience on, or they've done more of. The Center for an Ag Economy, for example, often works with value-added producers and can do other additional things like food safety plans and recall plans and HACCP, that sort of thing. Land for Good just does transfer planning with us. They work throughout New England states, but Mike Gia, you may have heard of his name before. He's the advisor working in our program, just doing transfer planning through them. But overall, I think, we've talked to other people from other states a lot about our program, and it's definitely seen as a unique model and one that people are very interested in. It's quite well established and it functions really well. And I have the pleasure of being on the other end of the evaluations every year and get to get all the feedback from the 100+ clients that we're serving. And it's really a pleasure to hear what people see as the value of the program. We get very little negative feedback, which is really nice. And The feedback that we get is, and this is what I experienced when we went through it as a farm too, was people really love the accountability of a business advisor. And the model of the one-on-one business advising is pretty unique. They go through a whole enrollment call with me for me to understand kind of what their needs are. And then I really think through each business advisor and who would be the best fit for them. And then they get connected and do the one-on-one work, meeting monthly and kind of working through the business planning process. And a lot of businesses, which is very common and natural, is you're just working in the business, you're in the grind, you got your head down, you're just getting done what you got to get done. You've got, lots of fires you have to put out every day, lots of problem solving, and it's extremely difficult to pause, step back, and make the time to work on the business and do the planning part of it, or address the really annoying things like, why isn't QuickBooks working? And what do I do about it? And where's my resource on that? So I think we come in, and what I hear from people and what we tell people is that we kind of hold that container for them to have a process where you have someone from the outside coming in. And while we call it business advisors, it's also, we're not there to tell people what to do. Like, this is their blood, sweat, and tears. This is their money. It's their family. It's their land. And there's a high level of respect for that. And we're there to ask the questions, bring information to the table, share experiences that the business advisors have had or might be helpful. And ultimately, the decisions are up to the businesses for how they want to move forward. But part of it is helping them tease out what their goals are and kind of what their North Star is. And we help create that roadmap to get there. The network of business advisors is also, I'd say, a unique attribute and benefit to it is that there's these 10 to 15 advisors that have a massive range of experience, from 20 years of doing this work to, starting a year or two ago and kind of being new to it. And so we do a lot to bring that group together, whether it's via email, and we're sharing different resources, or asking for, an architect for a barn or someone who can do dairy food processing consulting. We can tap into that network. We get together 4+ times a year and have pretty in-depth professional development days, ranging from topics of, estate planning and the creation of wills to how do we work with partners like Ag Mediation and Farm First. We'll do info sessions like, hey, the Working Lands Grant is coming out. Let's do, an hour-long session with someone from Working Lands so we can learn about what are the ins and outs of this year's grants. We've done that with DBIC, with REAP, with some of the other big programs. And yeah, so my role is to really understand what do we need as a network to increase those business planning skills and what we can offer farm and forest businesses, and then how do we offer that throughout the year to our advisors so they're always increasing their skills and just knowing what's going on. Like, the businesses count on us to know what grants are out there, who they can go to for a loan, who they can go to for crop production advising. If there's anything that we aren't specifically offering, our goal is to be able to connect them with somebody who can offer that. So definitely we're there to be a big resource. The other thing I just wanted to share, this is a little bit off what I was supposed to talk about, Liz, but I just want to say, the other kind of key pieces I hear back in evaluations from people about our program, which to me is like, that's the gold, right? Like, that is what people take away when they finish the program. So it's that accountability of having somebody to show up at their farm, or forest business every 3-4 weeks. It's access to resources, as I just mentioned. It's the understanding of numbers. So a lot of folks are kind of going on gut instinct, or they're at the farmer's market and, hey, this person over there is pricing their blueberries with this number, and so they're going to be below or the same or above. But when they leave the program, they're hopefully knowing exactly how much it costs to produce the blueberries, what they need to make to pay their bills and to have the margin to keep the business going. So every decision it's just comes with a lot more analysis and advanced kind of skill building around that. And what's very common too is people are often in these businesses because they're really great at the craft, whether it's growing food or creating the forest product. And they have often, or they tell us they're kind of missing the financial skills or the marketing and sales skills. And so we really try to kind of supplement the craft with those business management skills. And I just get great comments like, this program changed my life and we could never have gotten through this without this advisor, particularly during transfers. which can be really complicated from generation to generation. Having that person
Mhm.
to support the process, it can be very emotional and just complicated, and people just don't even know where to start. And we kind of come in and help shepherd what can be like a very intimidating, overwhelming process for people. So I just wanted to share those few little tidbits as well.
Thanks, Callie. I just have one more slide that I wanted to show really quickly. Okay, maybe two. I want to reiterate, we do a lot of work around farmland access and transfer. I don't think we need to say more than what Callie just said, and what we said on the slide about honey fields, but here are another couple of great examples of farmland access projects. And then we also have a grant program for folks who have recently completed either a business or transfer plan. They become eligible when we have enough funding available for a small implementation grant. So they've identified some really key projects and strategies within their business or transfer plan, and they can pick something and apply to us. It's ranged from like $5,000 to $10,000 over the years, depending on what funding we have available. But those are really easy to access, low to no match. And they've been a really great way to help catalyze some of the awesome projects people are coming up with as key strategies in their business plan. So I'm gonna stop sharing for a little bit. Any questions on that program overview before we start talking more like back and forth about feedback and what we're seeing on the ground? Am I calling on people? Chris?
Yeah, go ahead. You're good.
Hi, good morning. Chris Castano, for those of you who don't know me, I represent the board position that is actively engaged in primary forestry and or logging. Thank you for the presentation. Certainly a lot of success with ag and farm businesses, but would you be able to share with me any stories that you might have or anybody that you've worked with in forestry related businesses?
Sure, yeah, we didn't go over this story, but just because we had the slide up 1 second ago, was Vermont Woodworking School. So I don't know if folks are familiar with that organization, but they provide education. They used to partner with a college around all different kinds of woodworking, fine furniture. And we've worked with them a couple times over the years. Probably like 8 to 10 years ago, we funded a cohort of sort of very startup businesses working out of the woodworking school that were like trying to figure out how to become more of a full-time business. So I think there were like 4 or 5 of them. And they did sort of like a little business cohort, learning management skills, learning financials. And one of those businesses was towards Nightfall, which is a fine furniture company. And the 2 owners, which include Kat Emil, I'm actually not sure how to say her last name. She and her business partner ended up, like, they still run that business, and now they also have taken over the Vermont Woodworking School. So they've been working with Chris Lindgren and Dave Redmond, who has worked in a lot of different businesses and was a lender and worked in the forest products industry. So they've been working all together to try to figure out how to get that organization really running smoothly and growing. Another example, oh my gosh, now I'm gonna forget their name, and Callie might need to help me with this, but firewood processor did a business plan, and then applied to us for a grant to switch to like an electric kiln, which is interesting. I'm not seeing a lot of that. So
Ethan Jeffrey?
yes, thank you,
Yeah.
Ethan Jeffrey. Pigs and firewood.
Another great one is White Rocks sawmill.
Yeah.
In Randolph.
Yeah, and I'll when I stop talking, I'll drop a link to our annual report in the chat. And Chris, there's a middle page that's a map that lists every single business, and it's not differentiated by farm or forest, but you can check through there too. The forest side is definitely sort of a smaller number in terms of total clients that we work with. But I would say, like, in a given year, it's sort of between 10 and 25 who are engaging either in a sort of business cohort with Dave and Chris, or really one-on-one individualized planning.
Thank you.
Helen.
Yeah, and Chris, to also answer with the Sustainable Jobs Fund, as Liz mentioned, receives some funding support, which allows our business coaches to work with working lands businesses, the vast majority of whom have been value-added food. However, that doesn't mean that we can't work with forest products. And in fact, I would really love to. So if you know of any forest products businesses that could really benefit from working with C-suite level coaches who, going through some kind of a transition period, maybe it's a leadership, maybe it's their downsizing, but they need to, pivot their business model, or they're trying to figure out how to enter new markets, especially if they're on the secondary side of things, because I think Chris Lindgren and the folks at Northeast Forest do a great job working with foresters and sawmills and on the more primary side of the business, of the supply chain. But if there's, secondary secondary manufacturers and others in the sector that could could really benefit from our coaching program, please reach out to me, because we have some open slots and I'd really love to get them filled, and I'd really love to get a forest products business in the mix.
Can you help me understand the whole tariff situation and why we have to deal with this on a daily basis? I really would appreciate that, Ellen.
I'm sorry, I can't get inside the head of the administration.
Yeah, I think if there's one takeaway that I'd love folks to walk away with from this morning, whatever that subject is, it's like, please just call Callie. Like if you're working with a business that you're like, I really think they could use some support, just call Callie. And Callie knows everyone. She's really able to differentiate, is this really going to be a best fit for the Sustainable Jobs Fund or for Sam or for someone else? Would a farm viability or forest viability enrollment make sense? Or really, do they just need to talk to this one attorney that we can point them to? Callie can be a great resource and help with all of that and get people pointed in the right direction in a very effective and efficient way. We try to reduce the number of jumps between people. Yeah, so Elizabeth had asked us to come and talk about our program, because what I'm realizing I didn't say is that Working Lands funding has been a part of our funding mix, enabling us to meet demand for this program since Working Lands started. And in particular, Working Lands funding has been the consistent and primary external source of funding for our forest work. So when Working Lands was getting started was when we changed from being the very long name of the Vermont Farm Viability Enhancement Program to the very long name of the Vermont Farm and Forest Viability Program, and really trying to be sort of aligned with Working Lands around that. We're working across both farm and forest. So thank you. It's been an important part of meeting really strong demand for this program over the years. We have really solid, consistent, stable base funding through the legislature, but we also do a lot of grant writing every year, because if we didn't, we would have to turn people away, and we don't want to turn people away. Okay, so sorry, I took an aside there, but Elizabeth asked us to come and just give some feedback to the board around what might we be seeing as priorities for funding, or how does it look to work with a business on the ground who's going through Working Lands. So mostly I think this is Sam's show, and Sam, if you want to just jump in, go for it. And then I'm going to pull some notes that Chris Lindgren sent too I asked him he wasn't able to join, but he sent some notes from what he's seeing on the forest side, and I'll share those after you.
Great, thanks, Liz. Chris just alluded to it. The tariff situation is something that, we're seeing a lot of uncertainty with the businesses that we're working with right now. It feels a lot like the beginning of the COVID pandemic in terms of folks need to be really, really astute business managers and plan and pivot accordingly as the ground shifts under them. In terms of Working Lands funding priorities, I think a lot of the slides that Liz put up there were clients of mine or are current clients of mine who have received Working Lands funding for specific projects around the growth and diversification of their businesses. And I think that is one of the, big strengths of the Working Lands program overall. A couple of the grantees from this year that I worked with, they just reached out to me to let me know that they had received grants. And I feel like they're a great representation of the innovation and diversification that we're seeing in the ag sector and the need to support those businesses. Both of them represent really capital challenged startup businesses within the first 5 years of operations, and the projects that were funded were really ones that would not have been made without Working Lands funding. A lot of the clients that we work with are trying to prioritize their capital to operations and to land purchase or land access in whatever form that takes. And so Working Lands funding can really help to develop out, do these distinct capital projects that provide infrastructure that are essential to the growth of their businesses. Eli and Valerie, who you just saw, they would not have had the ability to access the capital to make the improvement of creating this new sort of storage and processing space that's going to allow them to grow their business. It's going to fit the business through the growth stages that they see moving forward. And they really, they wouldn't have been able to do that without Working Lands funds. I reached out to a couple of the other planners that work with me, and the big concern that they have right now is around the loss of federal grant programs for livestock, primarily livestock infrastructure, the NRCS programs around grazing and fencing and water lines, and then also potentially hoop houses for vegetable farms. So I think that's an area that, Working Lands hasn't historically been as active, but may be an opportunity moving forward. Claire alluded to it in the chat, but I think there's a really nice symbiosis between the Working Lands program and the Farm Viability program, in that it works really well for us to work with farmers to grow their business management skills, and then for them to receive a Working Lands grant that demonstrates that all that work they put in and the path that they're on is really based on building the viability of that business long term. So yeah, for me, I really, my notes were these farmers are taking a lot of risks right now, even more so with climate change and with the current political environment. And they have to be innovative and they have to diversify. And that's what we're really seeing, and that the types of capital improvements that are being funded through this program are really essential. I wish we could grow it. It's really nice to have the bigger pools of funding through Working Lands, and then also through some of the other agency grants over the past couple years that allowed people to make investments in these areas of their business that allow them to receive more of the dollar from the customer through value added or higher margin sales, and to capture more of the dollars for the products they're pulling out of the field. Yeah, so that's what I have to say. Liz?
Can I
Any
ask a
response?
question, Liz?
Yeah, for
to
questions.
Sam?
Let's do
Is
questions.
that, or did you want to add something right away?
No.
No, okay. Sam, my question is I think it's what you were just alluding to it. We Working Lands went through a handful of years where we had more funding, which felt amazing. And now, in FY25, and we don't know yet for FY26, we're at the $1 million base funding level. And I think something that we're always wrestling with is whether to be more to target like specific like sectors within the farm and forest economy. So basically also we're seeing huge demand, right? So we're turning away, and people put a lot of effort into, filling out applications. So the question is often coming from a not wanting to waste anybody's time, because we know everybody's stretched. So we have, 5 times the demand than we do an available fund. So I feel like there's always this push and pull of, do we narrow the eligibility or do we keep it open? And I would just love to hear the Farm and Forest Viability's thoughts on that. And that narrowing could take on so many different like shapes and sizes, right? Which is, I think it's just important to name, like, and there have been different grant opportunities, very focused on, there's been grant opportunities fully focused on diversification initiatives, or, meat processing and slaughter initiatives, or it could be like a certain, size or like, stage of business, just as examples of like the types of eligibility we're thinking about.
Yeah. It's a challenge. I think to limit it to, sector specific developments would eliminate some of the innovative projects that sort of develop organically as part of the application process. I do feel that the highest impact that these funds can have is in those sort of like mid-scale improvement projects. It's in that like $30,000 to $75,000 range probably. Whereas the smaller projects, those are usually for new and beginning farmers that are in a really risky position anyway. Whereas the folks that are going for these larger projects, or not larger, but mid-scale projects, are really in that growth stage for farms. And then just a note around the large applicant pool, I think, is being as explicit as possible about really tying the grant application to a really robust set of financials that demonstrate how it's going to improve viability, and then also a business plan if possible. I think that's why our farm viability clients, they're not, we get a lot of requests for grant support outside of the farm viability program. We work with a lot of clients outside of the farm viability program funding, and we get people referred to us who just want to access working lands grants, and they'll come to us and say, what should I do for this grant application? Like, what project should I do? And that's the wrong way to go about it. We view grants as an opportunity within a much larger capital stack and timeline. And, as much as you can make that a priority in the application process for people to demonstrate that they're really thinking about this as a long-term time horizon, and that this is an incremental increase in the infrastructure or operations of the business that are geared toward long-term success. So I don't know if that really helped. It is nice, the sector-specific ones, if it's really targeted and there's an area where there's a really distinct need, like the meat processing one really made sense. I'm not sure if focusing on, a specific other type of farm would be warranted unless there was like a really specific market opportunity, but I can't think of any great examples of that type right now.
Yeah, no, I'll just add that I think one thing that we talk about within our program is that there's not like a rule around success. Like there's not like one business type that within agriculture is automatically the thing that warrants statewide investment. And it's like sort of a combination of the right skills to the right markets, the right production understanding, the right business planning. And that is what drives success more than like, oh my gosh, like we definitely need more goat dairies because Vermont Creamery could buy more Vermont goat milk. Not that that's not worthy of pursuing, like we're working with a lot of goat dairies. But I think my personal perspective is pretty aligned with Sam's, that keeping it a little bit more broad makes room for that innovation and allows projects to rise to the top regardless of what sector they're in. Do we have a hard 10 o'clock stop? Okay. Well, then I did just put in the chat some of Chris Lindgren's notes, which are more sort of around what he's seeing across the forest sector with his clients. And if anybody has any specific questions about that, why don't you drop them in the chat and I can pass them along to Chris, just in the interest of time, because I could try to answer them, but I think it'd be better if we just sourced it straight from him.
And you do have until 10:05, so if there is another question, like I think you could take a question from Donna, and then Alex, and because we have a break after this, which we should take, but there is a little bit of. We have until 10:05 at least. Alex, I saw Donna and then Alex.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that, I review maple applications, and a lot of people in the maple world request the same types of projects, but in general, as I'm reviewing them and reading them, and I say, oh, this makes sense. These people are really stating a case, and then I see that they've been involved in the farm and forest viability, and so I think your work is helping. I really do, because I feel like the applications are more coherent and really, like you said, have more of a long-term goal in stating their case. So keep up the good work.
Donna. Thank you. Said it better than I could. Alex?
Yeah, Sam, I was trying to pick up the thread you had there with Elizabeth's question about sort of areas to focus in, and I'd love to just hear your flip of it on its head. So like, what are the things we should maybe not be focusing on that you bump into a lot?
Yeah, for me, it goes to that sort of long-term planning and long-term viability. Like I think we work with folks who are really, when we're trying to support them, I think it's the type of improvements that they would like. I wouldn't want you funding the types of improvements that they should be making through normal operations and cash flow, right? It's sort of like the purpose of this funds is to recognize and boost the farms that are really being innovative and are being run in a way that they're going to be viable long term. They're going to increase the economic activity in the communities that they're in. They're going to be able to employ more people and expand more. And I think it's, to be able to, to fund something like a barn build out, that's something that they would do, or they should be doing anyway through like traditional debt financing or something like that. I think that those types of projects just don't really, it's not the role of this funding. I think it really is. Looking at Eli and Valerie, they would have made that investment. They would have made it probably 5 years down the road, because they're prioritizing a ton of capital to operations, and they need to purchase this property, right? So it's recognizing the other things that are going on in those farm businesses, and that this particular thing, the other thing I would say is, like, if it's a really high risk, ask, say, like a value-added dairy processing plant for a dairy, those type of things, if that, if they have a really sound concept and they've worked on the market and they've got the marketing materials, they've got everything set up, and it's like, it's something for the expansion of that or the purchase of a specific piece of equipment. But if it's for the whole package to like buy like a processing plant in a shipping container, that's not something that I would, if they don't have the back end economics and they don't have a really concrete record of sales and marketing, that's not a project that I would be interested in, because they'll probably end up like selling that container 2 or 3 years later when they realize that they can't put enough milk through it to be able to make the whole thing work, right? So it's not profitable. So yeah, I think the people, yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I just think the people who demonstrate the capacity or have just demonstrated the capacity to grow their businesses and then grow them profitably, they may not be profitable yet. It's that trajectory that I'm looking for. And then the real understanding of how the economics of this improvement funded through this program is going to increase that viability over time.
I think this is I'm going to say something that's like a whole separate conversation, but I just want to seed this, that we had a lot of debate about removing the requirement for business plans for these grants, especially for the lower amounts. And I think it'd be interesting to get Sam to talk more about his perspective on that, or someone else. Like, it feels, I think to our network, that feels a little fraught, and that like we can see both sides, but that having that full business plan, especially for the bigger grants, like we definitely see the worth of that. Yeah, and just because we only have 1 minute left, I wanted to just make really clear that Sam is like a very special, unique unicorn who is sought after across the country. So it's just so cool that the state has really invested in this program, and the Intervale and other organizations that we work with have really put so much effort towards being these incredible resources for farm and forest businesses. And like, people are calling the Intervale all the time to understand your programs, and you and Sam and other farm and forest viability folks are often like looked to across the country for examples of like what a really solid business coaching program can do. So hats off. Thank you, Sam, for coming, and thanks to everyone who couldn't be here, but we're sort of trying to represent that whole network this morning.
Thank you all for your continued dedication to the ag and forestry sector. Appreciate you putting all this into 1 hour. I know that's not easy. And we will let you go, except for Liz. I think she's going to stay for the remainder of the meeting. So the rest of us will take a 10-minute break, and appreciate you too, Callie, putting your contact information in the chat.
Yeah, and one plug though, Callie and Sam, before you guys get off. I mean, I would like to consider this as I think we try to pretty consistently seek feedback and interaction with the Farm and Forest Viability Network. And over the past 2 years, like especially, and I think this is good for the board to know, we've really reached out to the business advisors to be reviewers, specifically of financials, with pretty good success. I mean, people are super busy, but we've definitely had an increase in business advisors reviewing grants, which has been, I think, really valuable. I just wanted to make sure to, share that like with the board and with, I think we've communicated that in different ways, but I think that has been a really important sort of strengthening of the collaboration between Working Lands and the network. And the other thing that I would say is that, we are always open and interested in feedback from business advisors who are directly working with businesses day in and day out. So open invitation to.
We appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. We understand.
Thank you.
Thanks for
All right,
having
we
us.
will stop the recording and take a 10-minute break. I could
Thank you,
have
everybody.
everybody back at 10:15, we will start back up. Thank you. We're gonna have to vote. Excellent. Thank you. The recording has started, so welcome back. Thank you for being so timely after your break of your return. Next up on the agenda is the approval of the board minutes from March 25th, and I would be looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion, Elizabeth Nance.
Thank you, Elizabeth Nance. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Bob. Is there any corrections, comments? Not hearing any, don't see any hands. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed, nay. All right, the motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we're going to turn it over to Elizabeth Sipple to talk about the feedback regarding our final report for the business grantees.
Great, thank you. So we have been updating the final report for the business grants to align with and to allow us to have the data that we need to report on all of the updated performance measures in the roadmap that the board worked on and ratified last summer. So that's been, so really the first part of the final report that I shared with you in the board packet. So I guess I should mention, if anybody wants the board, this final report was shared in the board packet email. So anyone who likes to navigate individually rather than on a shared screen might want to pull that up. But really the first like 6 pages of the report is gathering data on the specific performance measures that we identified in the updated roadmap. And gathering them in a way that's going to allow us to present on like percent changes based on grant funding. But where we are going to focus today, as I shared in the packet, is on this section of the report that is seeking to get feedback from grantees about the working landscape as they see it or as they experience it. And this section we really created with the intention of asking for information that we hope will be useful to the board in feeling like, again, like you are informed, and that information that would be useful also for budget prioritization, conversations and needs analysis. So this really, like, if this information doesn't feel useful to the board, like, we will take it out, because you really are the target audience for, like, this is not information that we are going to be putting in the impact report, for example. These questions really are meant to be useful to the board. So since you are the target audience, we definitely want to have your feedback. And again, I think we are completely open to striking entire questions, changing questions, or adding questions. Claire is going to share her screen. If you're navigating independently, you can just navigate to page 7 of the report. I'm just going to read I'm not going to read the multiple choice options, but I'm going to read the questions that I am talking about. Again, these are beginning on page 7, sort of the top of page 7. So I'm going to read through them, and then I'm going to ask for, very specific feedback for, like, this doesn't feel like it's going to be helpful. It would be very helpful to have, this question asked, so that, like, and you can feel free to drop it in the chat or say it out loud, and Claire's going to actually capture your input live on the shared screen. And Ellen's putting some thoughts in the chat. That's great. Thank you, Ellen. So I am going to read out the questions, and then we're going to start asking for feedback. So the first question is all about current challenges. What are the biggest challenges your business is currently facing? And we've asked them to please choose the top 3. And there's a pretty significant drop down list that we would be happy to, add to as well. Specifically, I think I have curiosity around, are we missing anything that's like very like forest related challenges? The next question is opportunities. What opportunities do you see for growth or improvement in your business? And then the next question is around supply chain challenges. What are the biggest challenges to the supply chain or markets you work within? And I would really love to have input on what the drop down options should be for the supply chain challenges, because I don't feel knowledgeable enough to create that drop down list, honestly, of like the supply chain challenges. The next question is needed services. What types of business assistance, executive skill development would you like to receive that you're not currently getting? And again, this is a drop down with choosing the top 3. Service gaps. Are there specific services or resources you believe are missing for businesses in Vermont? So that's what we have. Claire, I think you can close the chat to make the just make the questions bigger. Like, we don't need to see the chats or the text box on the side of the document. All right. So those are the questions that we have brainstormed. And hopefully you all did have a chance to review prior to today, and we're going to jump into feedback. I see Alex with his hand up.
Yeah, my initial reaction is to think, I don't know how to draw the line between asking leading questions and not just having fill in, the blank open slate. But I find that a lot of these questions are pretty, if I'm filling out a survey or something like this and I'm time constrained, I just pick 3 and I move on. And that's not very helpful to the data collector. And those leading questions can be framed, so nicely that I just pick them and then you don't really get any feedback from me. Whereas if you have a little bit of a short answer question, then you might get something that is surprising. And, these are things that are obviously important, but they're not particularly surprised. Like we know these are important. And so I don't quite know where that line is between leading question and sort of a place to, maybe find something that we're not already aware of.
Mm-hmm. I was in like thinking about the drop down, I was thinking like, if I'm sharing it back with the board, like, do I want to be able to say like, hey, 90% of people said, this is like a top challenge. But I wonder if it should be, I mean, there's always an other option, but I also feel like, yeah, if it's a drop down, people are gonna tend towards
I
choosing.
want to like hear a sentence from somebody like, hey,
Yeah,
what is
okay.
the thing going on in your world? Like, of course, labor shortages and like all these things are going to be important. So
Yeah.
what's really in your world?
So would you just, your suggestion is, Alex, is drop the like multiple choice and just ask the short answer?
Yeah, or do both, because the multiple choice is a very quick question. It doesn't take long if I'm filling something out, but the short answer is a little bit longer. It's a little more commitment, but I think potentially a much higher value to us. But I think the data that the drop down would yield is important. You want to be able to say like, hey, most people, these are the top 3, but
Mm-hmm.
the real juice is going to be in that short answer, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I like. Allison.
I agree with that concern, and I think a possible way to address it might be to start with an open-ended question and ask somebody to actually write a statement, but then to keep this in here, and instead of just doing it as a drop-down menu where they choose the 3, sometimes I find that I get more meaningful input if we're asking survey respondents to rank each option on a scale of like 1 to 5 or something, like big concern, no concern at all. And not everybody will rank every single thing, but at least it feels less leading.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I agree with Allison on that. We need to understand relative challenges and opportunities, not just the total universe.
And I think just adding in, removing any kind of leading words also, like it's not labor shortages, like maybe there isn't a shortage, it's just labor. Is that an issue? Or rising cost, it's just cost.
Okay. Uh-huh. Oh yeah, that's helpful. So, and what about like you choose a challenge that's real for you, and then there's like a short answer where it says like, please explain. Like, please like elaborate on why it's a challenge. Like, so combining them, would that make sense? Or
I think just leaving it really open-ended in that short answer is
the way to go. Okay.
yeah, but I'm not a social scientist.
Yeah, no. Okay. So are there any, like, as we're looking at this first question, are there any, and Claire, I think you can go ahead and make those changes. Like, we don't want rising cost of inputs. We want costs.
Cost,
We don't
just
want,
cost of inputs.
yeah, we don't want labor shortages. We want, let's just try to capture all the suggestions here so they're not lost. I mean, I know we're is there anything that we want to add? Like, and I think for to the drop down. Allison Lowe?
Yeah, under labor, that can cover a lot of things. So I think you might want to break it into maybe two categories, one for labor availability and another one for worker safety.
Okay.
I also, and maybe I'm just not reading this correctly, but if you're talking about operational flow and efficiency, there can be some circumstances where it's hard to look at it separately from worker productivity.
Mm. Okay, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I was thinking of that more as like sort of infrastructure, but that's interesting. So I wonder, yeah, okay. We'll have a note there and think about the all right, let's move on. So the opportunities is short answer, Alex. Um so and I don't but I would honestly, I think I was just drawing a blank when I was working on this for like the opportunities, but I think if there are, I guess let's skip opportunities and go to the supply chain challenges. If people can help to throw out challenges that you have identified in the ag and forestry sectors, or would it be, I feel like disconnected from understanding the most significant challenges. Or we could just also keep this as short answer. Because I don't think we necessarily have to have like percentage report out on all of these as well. Like the short answer allows us to pull out trends. But the drop down would actually allow us to provide you with like X% of respondents said, X. Bob?
Yeah, the supply chain challenges for now and in the near term are just complete uncertainty. Businesses are just sitting on their hands, putting off decisions because you don't know what's going on. And my other thought on supply chain is it your inputs or supply chain outputs for your business? You can look at it both ways. Like supply chain, all ag and forestry businesses are part of a supply chain. So is it distribution issues, et cetera?
So and I think that's where because I think it's both, right? So I was thinking
Right.
that we would be asking for both. So I think, if we're creating that list, it would be like distribution, storage,
Right.
like what would be the other, like on the input side, would you just put access to raw materials? Yeah, okay, Alex is giving.
In my world, it's packaging. For the near future, most of our cardboard comes from Canada. Forest products have not been exempted on that. Aluminum is Canadian for cans. Glass is Pacific Rim. No one can make any decisions. It's going to chew up a lot of people's lines of credit. So it's, I think a lot of businesses are going to shrink because of it. But we'll see.
And it does feel like we're in this like incredibly like like uniquely challenged time. Like these report, we're gonna be a year out. Like these are final reports for this year's business grantees, but we could be asking, like, yeah, but I think that the impact will still be being felt.
And
Okay.
as far as our work, our past, we've done a tremendous amount of past work on the output supply chain, improving that in the state. I mean, I think that's some of our biggest successes is improving the ability to distribute product across the state through multiple stakeholders that are cooperating. That's a comment, not something that we need to ask questions about.
And and Claire, I would just add to that list distribution, storage, and I would take out access to, because I guess that's leading. I would just say raw materials, packaging. Alicia.
Was someone before me in the queue? All
I
set.
don't.
So yeah, I'm wondering, this is tangential, but within the supply chain piece, I'm curious if we are getting a number around how the grant may have impacted their participation in the supply chain in one way or another, in terms of like, are we seeing that they're impacting regional businesses? Like, are we tracking and quantifying that regional impact? And I think that's related to opportunities of like, how has this grant impacted you in terms of are you now distributing outside Vermont? What does the expansion look like? Things of that nature. This isn't necessarily forward looking. This is looking to like, close up, like what was your impact from the grant? And I'm curious if we're tracking any of that.
Well, the whole like beginning section is tracking for grant impacts. We're tracking we're tracking grant impact on every single performance measure that's in the roadmap. And that is not a performance measure in the roadmap. So we're not tracking for accessing new markets, like due to the grant. So that's just, and it's hard. It's like, where do you stop? Because it's a long final report. We have a lot of performance measures. But I'm also realizing we are close to time. So I think like the zoomed out picture here is like, I would like to hear a little bit more board feedback. And Donna, we're going to come to you quickly on like, will this information actually be very useful in making decisions? Because again, like, if not, we don't want to just ask these questions, without applying them. And like, are these the right questions? I mean, I think I sometimes zoom in and then I remember I'm like, oh no, like that's the bigger question that I have for you all right now. Donna.
Yeah, I was just going to add, when you're talking supply chain, Bob summed it up pretty well, but in the sugaring world, it's all about equipment. 90% of our equipment comes out of Canada, and we're all on edge trying to figure out, what's going to happen to the prices of equipment. So we're lucky in the raw material category because it's free, but
So if we can just take like 5 more minutes to have that zoomed out perspective on like, does this feel useful and are these the right questions?
Elizabeth, you have 2 hands up still. Chris has been
Okay.
waiting a bit.
Chris, and then who's the other?
Alicia's.
I think,
Mine can be lowered. Let's see.
It's old.
okay.
Thank you.
So I'll go
Chris.
quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I hear from within the state in terms of supply chain challenges is the inability to access local wood. So everybody, wants to buy local wood. It's a good sales tool. It's also cost effective. So with us losing sawmills and whatnot over and over and over again, everybody's concerned about the future of finding local wood. They're having to reach out further and further outside the area to find the wood that they need, and that's cost prohibitive. So I wonder if maybe under raw materials, we could just make a comment about local raw materials.
Mhm. Trying to get back to. And Ellen, your comment is specifically to the upper part of this impact report. Not the, my question is like, I think the upper part is clearly like we need it to report on our roadmap that we all agreed upon, but do we want this landscape level information, or do we just want to source it, elsewhere, like from partners?
I think having a couple more questions, given how long it is, I mean, it's not going to really make that much of a difference. And then we have some grounding directly from individual businesses and not just from the service provider community.
And I think, Ellen, your question, so this is the final report. It is tied to the final payment. And that's why we've shifted a lot of these questions. Some of these used to be asked in the annual, so 1 year after the grant report, which we would, people are done with the grant. They're like moved on. So we wouldn't get as high a response rate as desired. And do these feel like the right questions? I think.
I like the direction that board members were suggesting. If there's just ways to streamline the answer process, like by having Likert scales or these drop down menus, like those kind of things, that will just speed things up for them. So, and this will be an online form. Is that what it is, like a Microsoft Forms or something for them to fill out?
It'll be web grants.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the actual questions themselves, like the format, I think we can definitely change that based on feedback, but the actual, we're asking about, very just is this, it's opportunities, challenges, and then service needs and service gaps. That's basically, that's it. Okay. Seeing a thumbs up from Ellen. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Okay. So then, great. Thanks all.
Would you like us to go into administration updates?
Yes.
Excellent. We'll start us off with the fact that I just heard from the speaker's office and they hope to have appointments done by the end of this week. So that's good news. As far as the legislature goes, we have S-124, which was our housekeeping bill that started in the Senate and did not make crossover. It has our water quality language in it that reaches the agreement between the Agency of Ag, Natural Resources, and satisfies the EPA, and hopefully the further information that's been put forward by CLF. So that's our hope, is that they will do an exception and get that language over to the other side in the House and have it passed before they go home. It's our understanding that they anticipate being here through the end of May for sure, early June. So we still have time. We have, let's see, S60, which was the Farm Security Special Fund, which is currently in House Ag. It's my understanding still that there's not funding attached to that, so more to come there. There's many that seem to support the initiative that are looking for the funding, so I think that's very positive. H398 was the VITA. It provides loans and other forms of financial assistance to businesses after disasters. That did make crossover. It's currently in Senate Appropriations. So I believe that too will pass. S45 is the right to farm bill, currently in House Judiciary. It's my understanding it will be going to House Agriculture soon. It has nuisance and trespass as passed by the Senate 25-5, so overwhelming support in the Senate. Currently, trespass seems to be the issue in the House Judiciary Committee that's being discussed at length. So we're pretty excited to see a right to farm bill make it this far through the process. Vermont has one of the weakest right to farm bills in the nation. It's something that we've tried, I would say probably it's been introduced for 4 to 6 years now. So to see that it started in the Senate, it's made it to the House, and it continues to have positive testimony is pretty exciting. So a lot of support around that as well. I think that's it as far as legislation goes. We do have some grant deadlines that are posted. I think I'll put a link in the chat so you all have access to the grant calendar at the agency. There's a lot going on. Other than that, I'm happy to take questions if anyone has a question.
Allison, do you want to share where, or never?
You're good? Okay, so seeing no questions, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth Nance.
Good morning. I have like nothing. Unless you're interested in brownfields, or there is a project-based TIF, but we're not calling it project-based TIF, that may actually get through. It's named CHIP. So I'm short. I think next meeting I don't know if we've talked about, not much since I've been here, the Forest Economy Program through Northern Borders Regional Commission. So I may have some words on that as the fall round will be cranking up in the coming months. We don't see a lot of Vermont activity around that. I'd like to get some applications in for that program.
Excellent. Look forward to that. I don't think, was there anybody on from FPR today?
Catherine.
Where's Catherine? Catherine, sorry, I didn't see you in there. Catherine,
Quite
would you
all
like
right.
to give an update?
Oliver was on earlier.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we did not prepare. I don't have an update from
Okay.
him.
Okay, I will say I have been in touch with Commissioner Fitzko in regards to H398, and I should have probably been more clear that forestry, agriculture, all the financial assistance in the disaster relief bills is inclusive of forestry as well as ag, all businesses. So I just want to be clear on that.
Allison,
Yes,
You had mentioned Vita in your updates, I believe.
I did in
Okay.
the language of H398.
Yeah. So I don't know if everybody knows Joan Goldstein, the Commissioner of the Department of Economic Development, is leaving in a week or two, and she is going over to Vita. So we're super excited about that. Well, sad to see her leave, but she's landing in a good spot.
I would agree. Yes, I've served on that board with Joan for years, so she's a wealth of knowledge and will be a fierce leader there as well. So a loss for the state, but a nice gain in the other side on the state. So pretty fortunate. All right, I think that's it for admin updates. I don't know if Jake has joined us yet. Ellen, you have a question? Oh, you're on mute.
Be okay with the chair, I'd like to make a quick update that I think would be
Yes,
of
please.
interest to the board.
Yeah.
Jake has not yet gotten on. He's finishing up his Farm to Plate staff team meeting. Quick update that one of our
Hey, Ellen,
yeah.
just 1 second. I think if Jake's not yet ready, you have 10 minutes later on in the agenda for also like a Working Lands Coalition learning and update. So you could give both updates at once, if that
Great.
works for
I
you.
will do that. I will do that since we have a little bit of time here. So I just wanted to update folks on one of the grants, the $250,000 grant we gave a few years ago now to Vermont State University, Randolph, then known as Vermont Technical College, to build out a meat processing facility on campus to do both training for continuing education purposes, but also for students. And as you all know, there was a lot of changes going on at Vermont State University with the transition. The educational program was ultimately put on hold, actually technically terminated. And so I just wanted to brief you all that there's definitely been some exciting developments. All the funding was raised for the meat processing facility. An RFP went out last fall. Construction has been underway at the facility. There was a ribeye cutting that Anson was able to attend along with a number of legislators back in last October, where that was officially kicking off the renovations work. And the exciting news is that it's nearing completion. Right now, they're thinking that they're going to have the final inspection, that the facility will be ready to go as of somewhere around May 19 or 20, which will be very exciting. And it will be really a state-of-the-art teaching facility for meat cutting. And very excited to see it all come to fruition. The hope is that sometime towards the end of June, there'll be an official ribbon cutting, grand opening, and so we'll keep you all posted because it'd be really wonderful if a number of board members could attend that, because this has been a big desire to have this facility in place, and boy, it just would be, we're so excited about it happening. All of the transformation work at the college has been 5 years in the making this month. So I'm definitely ready for this whole program to get rebooted. The Center for Agriculture and Food Entrepreneurship. The current staff is working through the process at Vermont State University to get the program relaunched. It will be an associate's degree in Ag, Food, and Forests. Chris Castano and other forestry folks on this board. At some point, there will be an advisory committee that will be developed to help the staff to strengthen the forestry elements of the curriculum. And if all goes as hoped for, we get through all these roadblocks, we will be looking to, starting this fall, to recruit students for the following academic year, so academic year 26-27. This will be an all hands on deck request of everyone who wants to see this program relaunch and be successful to reach out to young people who are looking for a 2-year degree and would be excited to join this new program, completely relaunched, reimagined, totally different curriculum to really meet the present day needs of both sectors. And So I will continue to keep you all informed, but it's been a long haul to get to this place that we're at now with the staff there. And I say only because I've been part of the outside advisory group, along with Regina Beidler, who works for Organic Valley, and Pat Moulton, the former president of Vermont Technical College, and Louise Calderwood, who used to work at Extension, and many other things. And we've got an advisory group of an advisory committee of about 20 amazing people in the sector who are advising the staff at this point on all things related to the program. So we're finally getting to a point where we might have students, butts in seats, as they say, the fall of 26, 27. We're very excited about that. Still have a few hoops to get through, but things are moving in the right direction. And then secondly, I know Jake is plugging in and is about to join in a minute or so. On the Working Lands Coalition front, I think you all know, the coalition put forward a request to the legislature for to support the governor's recommend of $1 million in base funding and add $2 million in one-time funds, so that the board would have $3 million to work with in the coming fiscal year. Unfortunately, even though the House Commerce and House Agriculture committees put forward in their budget memo to House Appropriations a request for increases, the House approved bill kept the Working Lands funding at $1 million in base. So the current focus is on the Senate Appropriations Committee and the Senate Agriculture Committee. Myself and Denise Smith from BCRD were in with Senate Ag last week. We also attended some of the Senate Appropriations Committee meetings and met with Senator Norris about him advocating for increased funding above the base of $1 million. We should know more this week where things stand. I know as board members, we're not allowed to say we are board members advocating, and so that continues to be true. However, if you as an individual feel so moved to reach out to Senator Norris or Senator Westman on Senate Appropriations, or Senator Perchlik, the chair of the Appropriations, and offer your views from your own personal experience, that would be very timely to do in the next couple of days. We're getting to the end time here on this, and it's not looking so good.
Thank you, Ellen. I also should let you know that Senator Westman has asked for information recently too in regards to Working Land, so he seems very engaged. So appreciate.
Yeah, I'm gonna be going over there later today, and I got from Elizabeth and Claire the investment summary document from last year's symposium, which I think will be very helpful. I'm going to give those to Senator Norris and Westman and Perchlik. The big issue that we're really trying to push is just, how critical the need is, especially right now with the uncertainty of the tariffs and the overall economy, and also the level of need versus how much we've had to work with as a board. So
that's great.
That's the update.
Bob?
Yeah, I spoke with Senator Westman a little while ago, but I'll reach back to him and remind him that the Working Lands has invested almost $800,000 in his district.
That would be timely, Bob. Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Ellen, do you feel like there's confusion around Working Lands, or do you feel like people, like based on the one-on-one meetings, that people actually have a pretty good sense of the program?
I think there's some senators that probably haven't been spoken to. That's really on the coalition members to do that work. I think there have been a number of good reach outs by former grantees that have let Senator Norris know. I know he received 2 Franklin County former grantees that reached out with a very nice email about the impact that these funds have had on their businesses. I think those folks are on board. I think the challenge is really one of money. When I was in Senate Appropriations last Friday afternoon, for instance, they were going through the one-times and going through the base increased requests. and they were basically 60 million short. And they were given the instructions to spend the weekend thinking about how they would remove 60 million from the current list. So, and we're not on that list. So this is a challenging time, but doesn't mean it's over. It just, I think, the more that we can be getting grantees in particular, reaching out, the more impactful that will be.
Thank you. And I just thought I'd let you know that Jake has since joined us. So I don't see his square yet on my screen, though I have it on large display, but he's likely on the second. So there he is. So Jake and Ellen are on up next as the farm to plate presentation. So I'm not sure which one of you wants to take the lead, but I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Jake, all you, man.
He's on mute. I can see his square. Jake's.
He is, yes, his computer for whatever reason needed to be rebooted, so it's going to be a minute.
Okay.
I think, Ellen, do you want to introduce?
Yeah, I can tee it up.
Okay.
Yeah. So Elizabeth Chadwick, nice to meet you. Ellen Kaler, I am one of the ex officio members of the board representing the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund, and Jake is, who will be joining momentarily, is our Farm to Plate director. And the intention of this session that Jake will walk you all through is to give you all a grounding in the current status of a wide range of data related to how the food system is doing, where we're at, and where there are increasing needs in terms of meeting supply chain opportunities, addressing challenges, et cetera. The Farm to Plate Strategic Plan, which is also known as the Agriculture and Food System Strategic Plan, which came out in 2021, serves as a foundational document for this board, as well as lots of others, organizations, as the roadmap for the next 10 years of strengthening our food system, increasing economic activity, increasing jobs, increasing the number of food-related businesses, ensuring that the food system meets environmental standards and contributes to a healthy ecosystem, and that there is healthy local food for all Vermonters. So there's a food access component to all of this as well. One of the additional documents that you may have been hearing is the Vermont Food Security Roadmap, which is a document that is a report that, with 2 years in the making, to develop, in essence, a 10-year strategy for ending hunger in Vermont by 2035. And it was a document, a roadmap that was requested, was part of the 34 strategic priorities that came out of the Farm to Plate strategic plan. So there were recommendations, which Jake will touch on a few, and one of those was to do this food security roadmap. That work is leading this session to a number of initiatives to strengthen food security in Vermont, and one of those is the bill that Deputy Secretary Eastman spoke about, of the Farm Recovery Fund of $7.5 million request. The original request was for 20 million, so that, think July 23 and 24 floods, how much time it took for FEMA to be able to meet the need and the level of need. And the idea is to have a Vermont specific fund that would be used in times of emergencies, that could be deployed much more quickly out of the Agency of Agriculture. So there are a number of bills around more funding for the food banks, Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program, more funding for a crop cash out of NOFA, which provides subsidized CSAs for low-income Vermonters, and also trying to save universal school meals from the chopping block, which was in the governor's agenda. In his address was to eliminate that program. So there's a lot of activity happening in the State House this year related to food security. And yeah, so that's a little bit of the background, sort of the why we're explaining all of this and the data involved. Typically this time of year, Jake or I provide some grounding in what we're hearing and sort of trends in the industry. And Jake, are you ready yet?
He's on.
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go.
Then I'll hand it over to him.
All right. Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, so I'm going to share up on my screen here a presentation of data, as Ellen mentioned, and I'm focusing mainly on economic metrics and indicators. So we can, I'll share afterwards. There's a more expansive presentation that we provided to the House and Senate at the beginning of the year that includes some environmental and food access components. But I felt like for today and for you all, honing in on the economic elements, and then yeah, ending with some both reflections and input on things for the board to think about from a funding priorities perspective, and just some of the trends that we're seeing across our network groups, and that complement some of the data that's going to be shared. So let me. Do I have? Yeah. Do I have sharing? Yes.
You should at the top right of
Yeah.
your screen next to the leave button.
All right. Let's see how this works. All right. This is convenient. Are you all seeing a slide?
Yes, we're in presentation, and Jake, just so you know, the bottom left of your screen is going to be where you change your slides. It says 1 to 18, and there's arrows.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure. There we go. Okay. All right. So here we go. And there was a slide change there. Just want to double check.
Yes.
Okay, great. So of course, I'm going to start a presentation that's focused on the census by actually sharing with you some non-census data on total economic output. And so this is how we look at total economic output of our food system, collected through both the ag census and also the economic census. And just to give very high level perspective on the breakout of output that's happening in the farm and food system here in Vermont. So agriculture is producing now over $1 billion in sales, and then that's compounded by food manufacturing. That's a $3 billion industry now in the state, and then beverage manufacturing is another almost $215 million. So just looking at production and processing, that's $4.3 billion of economic output that's happening in the production and processing space in Vermont. And that includes, that's not that's not only like local raw inputs, but that is going to include, on the manufacturing side, businesses that are utilizing other ingredients from elsewhere. And Allison, you got a question?
Yeah, and maybe it's, I don't know why this is happening to me, but I'm not seeing a presentation. There's where the slide is supposed to be, there's a big gray block and it says can't display presentation. There was a problem displaying the content.
Okay, let me
I can see it.
Slightly
Are
different
others
way.
having issues with it?
I can see
Alan's also not seeing it. I am seeing it. I'm
Allison,
wondering if it's
Are
an
you in like the
internal.
online Teams, or are you in
Yeah,
the
let
Teams
me
desktop
do
app?
this. Let me see if I can just share it on from my computer, because it's sharing it through the Teams app. So okay.
I can see it now.
Can folks see this now?
Yeah. Can you put it in display mode?
Yeah, that's
presentation?
I'm struggling with for some reason this isn't working the way that I
It's
that I want
okay.
it
I mean,
to.
we can see it pretty good. It just shows your slides on the left. That's fine.
Yeah, okay. Let me just try one other make one other attempt here at
Technology always keeps us on our toes.
yeah. All right. I don't want to use presenter mode.
Down on the lower right, Jake, next to that slider, there's a looks like a projection screen. I think if you hit that, maybe over a couple more to the right.
Yeah, it's projecting it onto my. I have two screens, so it's putting it back over to the. Here, I've got one other idea. I'm gonna. This might be a little disorienting at first, but I think it'll work out. So can you all, do you see the slide now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. Great. Yeah, so just sort of setting the context here, right? So production processing, $4.3 billion of economic output. And then you know, we get some additional output through distribution and retail and food service. But that is generally, you know, in the reselling of food, and that's inclusive then of definitely more food from elsewhere in the output that's measured in the distribution retail space. So a good indicator of our, you know, local production and processing in agriculture and food manufacturing is really that 4.3 billion number. So just to give a sense of then also from like an establishment's perspective, there's been some interesting trends here of where we have seen an almost 11% decrease in the number of farms from 2012 to 2022, which is, so this is covering 5-year intervals from 2012 to 2022. But over that time, we've also seen almost a 20% increase in food manufacturers, almost 24% increase in the number of distributors, and then also an increase in the number of retailers. So the food manufacturing, distribution, and retail environment in the state has become arguably more diverse. And while the number of farms has decreased, and I think you could attribute that farm decline. It's not just dairy, but I think there are some small and diversified operations that kind of emerged in what was a boom period in 2012, and we have seen some smaller operations go out of business since then too. So I think it's the compounding factor of consolidation in dairy, losses in dairy, and also some of the diversified farms that we have.
Hey, Jake.
Yeah.
Sorry, at the bottom of the screen, not to give you more technical. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard, it's hard for me to know like what is actually.
No, you're fine. Thanks.
Up here. So now just getting into more specifically the sort of agricultural component here. So farm gate sales since 1997 have increased by $554 million, and certainly the 2017 to 2022 increase, there's some inflationary elements to that, but even if you account for it, there are some real increases in the value of products sold. So this would be farm gate is the value of products sold off the farm, whether that's as raw inputs for elsewhere, as sales to stores, and direct to consumer. It does include also some value added products that are produced and sold off farm. So there is some of that included in the number. But again, agriculture in Vermont is now a billion-dollar industry. How is that? How are those sales distributed across commodity types? So from left to right, this is going from greatest sales to least by commodity group. And then that orange line, as you factor in each category, is accounting for the percentage of total sales that those categories make up. So milk, for instance, at nearly $600 million is almost 60% of the total value of farm gate sales. If you look at milk, maple, other crops, and beef, you're already accounting for around 80% of total sales just in those 4 commodity groups. But that's not to say, there has been some really significant jumps in the last 5 years. So maple has seen considerable increases in the last 5 years. Almost 100% increase of sales in maple, but also vegetables, nearly 70% increase, and then poultry and eggs, nearly a 90% increase in sales over time. Still, still small, but those are pretty, I think, significant jumps and represent, I think, some trends, that are starting to emerge. And I think you can kind of look at this as, there's the 4 commodity groups that are 50 million and above, and then we've got some emergent and growing groups that are around the 20 to 50 million range. And then there are some, smaller, less than $10 million industries that we have that make up the remainder. So this is a good way also just, I think, to understand like relative scale of the different industries that are operating in Vermont. But also I think too is a good reflection of like we do have a diversity of production and different types of products available that are coming from the state.
Jake, just a really quick, can I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
I think you said this farm gate means direct to consumer, or it just means sold directly. Yeah, are these numbers direct to consumer sales?
It's not only direct to consumer, it would be the value of fluid milk that's sold to the co-op. It's any kind of the value of the raw product that's sold to consumers, manufacturers.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think Donna has a question too.
Yeah, I was just curious why horses are in there. I don't think of horses as a farm product. I mean, Christmas trees you don't eat either, but at least, people consume them.
Yeah, so this is just pulled from the census commodity groups. And it's a great question as to how that value is even calculated. Yeah, so the census commodity groups do include some non-consumable products, including Christmas trees. And then just quickly kind of reflecting on how these sales distributed across regions of the state. Addison, Franklin, Orleans, Orange, and Chittenden are the top 5 producing counties from a value standpoint. And I think this too reflects structurally we still are very very oriented towards dairy production. And but also since 2012, every county has seen some increase in the value of sales. So, we are seeing kind of growth that is, happening across the state in every county. Certainly some more than others, but I think that's definitely a positive that the growth is being distributed across all of our counties. And yeah, I mean, I haven't looked more deeply at, say, Addison and Franklin, because that's those increases are not only attributable to dairy, probably some of the other crop production that's in supportive of dairy. So yeah, haven't dived too deeply into the granular elements of these county trends, but I think you could probably attribute a good portion of it still to some of the changes that are happening in the dairy industry in the Addison and Franklin, Orleans. So looking at non-dairy livestock, I mentioned this earlier, but the big growth area has been poultry and egg sales, so nearly doubled since 2007. And I think I shared this with the House and Senate Ag committees, that the way that the census identifies a farm by production category is, once the farm sales from one commodity group are 50% or more of their total sales, it gets classified as that type of production. So I think what has happened with poultry and eggs is that a lot of diversified farms that maybe had a laying flock or were raising some meat birds, but they didn't make up more than 50% for some period of time. I think now some of those farms have specialized more or grown in scale certain elements of their diversified production. I think poultry and eggs is one of those areas where those flocks have gotten larger, or they've added more laying hens and are relying more on that commodity type to carry sales. So I think some of this change is a reflection of the shifts of some of the diversified farms and more specialization that's happening, and also market demand and trends. It'll be interesting to see how this continues to change, just as egg prices have continued to go up and facing all sorts of supply chain disruptions and tariffs into the future here. So yeah, but I think that explains a lot of this kind of shift over time that's being covered here. Relatively, the other livestock areas have remained fairly stagnant. Some small growth in beef, and pigs is the other one that is that top pink bar, which is still a small, is only about 3 million in sales, but it has increased over time, more so than some of the other categories that are covered here. Yeah, and also just let me know. I can't see like people's hands, or if you've got questions, so just
I'm
let me
watching
know.
for you. You're
Yeah,
good.
thanks.
Thanks.
I'm blind right now. And then we look at the kind of the produce industry, and also nursery and floriculture. Vegetables is the big one, of nearly tripling since 2007, and nearly an increase of $27 million over that period of time. And it's close to being now a $50 million industry in the state. I think the other interesting thing here is just I think we sometimes maybe don't fully recognize the size and scale of the nursery floriculture industry, and it is pretty significant. at $25 million in farm gate sales. You know, and there's some kind of modest increases in fruits and tree nuts over time, but also berries. But berries was not covered in the 2007 census as a standalone category, which is why it's not. There's no blue bar for 2007, but nearly a doubling from 2017 and 2022 in berries, but the relative scale is still pretty small. And yeah, I wanted to give just there's a lot of like other land-based data, but just to kind of give a sense of then you know, the amount of land that's being utilized to produce these commodities and generating these values. You know, again, we're definitely very much oriented towards dairy production. The dairy specific acreage has decreased by nearly 37%, but the other crop farming has increased over time, and that's, you know, likely a shift in land utilization of what was once categorized as dairy land, now being categorized in other crop farming, because those farms have now, you know, shifted their sale, you know, sold their herd and shifted sales to crop production to other farms, or with consolidation, you know, larger dairy operations may be in their business structure, may be operating certain parts of land under crop production, and other parts as the dairy business. And yeah, so with that dairy decline, we have seen this other crop farming increase. So those structural changes in the dairy industry, but then also, you know, the oil seed and grain acreage has increased significantly, as well as the vegetable acreage. But you know, vegetable acreage is still only 30,000 acres, and of those 30,000 acres, I think at any given point in time, it's like 3,000 to 4,000 of those acres are actually being cropped. So you know, small acreage footprint, but also, you know, large kind of value being generated per acre in the vegetable industry. And I think the other just big takeaway here too is that our production, you know, from a acreage standpoint, is very much weighted towards livestock in general. You know, that it's a more extensive type of production, and utilizes a lot more land, ag land in the state. And just a couple of notes on direct sales. So we did see, so the jump from 2012 to 2017 is in part a change in how the census is calculating direct sales values. So the starting in 2017, they started to include value-added products that were directly sold, you know, made on farm and sold directly to a consumer. So that those value-added products were not included or calculated in the 2012 or any prior years. So that's where that jump in effect comes from, is in a change in methodology. And then you know, there was a slight decline in those total direct sales, but I'm going to show in a couple of slides after here why there's more to that story. And then the orange line there is just the average per farm. So it's, you know, a slight decline in the average per farm from 2017 to 2022. But on average, yeah, I think $26,000 of direct sales on average happening for a Vermont farm. So this is something that only started in 2017 that the census started to look at, and this is the value of food sold directly to retail markets, institutions, and food hubs. So while the direct-to-consumer sales, say through a farm stand, CSA, farmers market, slightly declined, the direct sales to retail institutions and food hubs significantly increased over that same period, 86% or nearly $47 million. So there's this, I think, a maturity that's happened in that period of time of, farms starting with those direct-to-consumer sales and then expanding or shifting sales to these other types of direct sale relationships with other types of markets, and food hubs in one instance. Food hubs being an intermediary, but the USDA recognizing that food hubs have a local kind of regional orientation, and wanting to account for that in this number. So some, I think some maturity of those operations that maybe relied on a certain type of direct sales for a period and have since either grown, expanded, or changed some of their business model to take advantage of these other direct market opportunities. And so, yeah, just looking at those two numbers then combined, it is actually an increase, and a nearly $40 million increase from 2017 to 2022. And I think, I think this will continue to be a really important number to watch, because these are really, like retail dollars back to the farm, rather than wholesale value, that where some of the other parts of that value of the transaction is being captured by middlemen, intermediaries, stores, etc. So I think this is an important kind of foundation for farm viability for a lot of our kind of small diversified operations. And I think this is I was just thinking about this in terms of, we're thinking about funding priorities and the trajectory of different industries, is like, if we look at dairy, there's just such a strong value added component. And also that value added production and the value that can generate is diverse in the sense of a lot of it's happening, it's like not quite 50-50, but there's a good portion of that that's happening at the farm level with on-farm processors. So there's a lot of value added production that's like happening on an individual farm, and then there's a lot of aggregated processing capacity that's happening off farm. And even in a mature industry like dairy, since 2013, we've seen an increase in the number of processing facilities, and that enables a lot of additional value to be produced, and dairy product manufacturing, almost $1.8 billion industry, and then within that, cheese manufacturing alone is a $1.2 billion industry. And I think the other reason I like to also bring some attention to this too is, as much as we are concerned about dairy, like it's a just on manufacturing alone, it's a $1.8 billion industry. So it's there are reasons for hope, and real strengths, here in the industry that I think we should continue to pay attention to and figure out how to support, which I know the Dairy Business Innovation Center is very focused on. And then the other, I think the other, I don't have a maple slide, but I think maple kind of falls in a similar category with dairy and meat, in terms of having like processing capacity. But this is where I could get some data from the Agency of Ag. Less growth on the meat slaughter processing facilities side, but these are also very capital intensive projects and facilities. And we've seen, within the number of facilities that we do have, we've seen expansions and upgrades and important investments made. And then the other thing that's shifting is just, I always forget to remember what the CIS acronym is, but it's basically agreements that sort of allows state inspected facilities to sell across state lines. And Vermont is one state because of the high, because of its high state standards, basically like being equal to federal standard inspection standards, is allowed, that meat processed in those facilities is allowed to be sold across state lines. And there's a certification process for that. But so we've seen, some shifts there of state facilities that have gone on to get that additional certification and provide that, valuable service to producers who are using those facilities where they can then not only sell within state, but across state lines.
And Jake, the
itinerant slaughter. CIS is custom itinerant slaughter.
No, not in this case, but
oh, it's not.
No, it's
now we're both going to be confused.
Yeah.
Jake, while you're thinking though, is 40 for the number of facilities? I just want to clarify the 40.
Yeah, that's the total.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
that is the total. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see if I can drag this over here. Yeah, that's neat.
I mean, I think you gave a good explanation.
It's a cooperative interstate shipping program.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah. No wonder I have trouble remembering that. So lastly, I just wanted to end with some farm viability slides. And so this is the percentage of farms that are reporting net gains and net losses. And in 1997, it was close, but the majority of farms at that time were still on average reporting more net gains than net losses. I think this is probably a good indicator of some of the challenges that the dairy industry has faced. So that now there are, on average, it's more likely that a farm is going to be reporting a net loss than a net gain. But if you look at this at the industry level, dairy still like the majority of dairy farms, at least according to the census, are reporting more net gains than net losses. The same is true, I think, for vegetables. And I'm not sure about, I think maple would be the other interesting one to look at. I can't remember. And then, yeah, a lot of other categories tend to see actually more reported net losses than net gains. And kind of drilling into this, you can look at this in a couple different ways. So this is net income by farm size, and so this would be the average reported net income per farm. And pretty clear that you don't see average net income being reported until you get to the 140 acre size. And then the average farm size in Vermont, according to the 2022 census, is 180 acres. And those kind of the 140 to 180 range, you're still only seeing reported net income, still below $20,000. And then what's not shown here is that as you get into, there are some larger categories, and their net gains are so much larger that if you put them all together, it makes all these other categories really hard to see. And so if you're in the 500 to 999 acre size, for instance, that's where you start to see reported net gains of $152,000 per farm, and the 2,000 and above is you're in the millions, the $2.6 million of average net gains. So yeah, that's just kind of one. It's pretty stark too around scale, and the fact that you're just there's a lot of constraints in these smaller farm sizes, but I think there would be a lot of variation depending on the product, the commodity group that you're looking at too. So not to say that there aren't farms that are 10 to 49 acres that are viable and reporting net gains.
Ellen has her hand up, Jake.
Yep.
I just on for me, the tables for the net farm income by size and acreage and all that are some of the most important from my vantage point of the census of ag. And just wanted to raise with the board members, this harkens back to what Sam Smith was saying earlier about really honing in on those businesses that are in the business of being in farming, and for the board to have some additional grounding about what it really takes to be profitable or at least break even in the space in terms of acreage and overall sales. And so when we go into our symposium and we're thinking about strategically how to deploy what will never be enough money of our grant making, that I think strategically we really need to be thinking about where, given that this is taxpayer money, how do we get how do we have the biggest impact on the most number of entities in the state because of the reach of those grant dollars, impacting more than just one business, especially if it's, because of the reality of what it takes to really be at least break even, if not profitable.
But Ellen, just a follow-up clarifying question, or, Jake, Ellen, so if we looked at this same thing, like specifically for vegetable farms, like would that acreage decrease? Like, the net acreage needed to be profitable as a beef farm versus vegetable feels very different. So would we, would it be helpful to have, sort of the per sector?
Yeah. I think that context matters a lot, Elizabeth, for sure. And that's why I didn't make that comment of I think if you look at this by commodity group, the may kind of shift in different directions, and that the fact that 30,000 acres of vegetable production is generating $40 million of value just demonstrates that you're probably going to see some different numbers here on the lower end of the scale if you were looking at vegetables than if you were looking at beef. This is probably for livestock a better general indicator of trends that you would see with livestock than you would see with veg and berry. Yeah.
And Ellen, just going back, do you think it would be helpful to look at the per sector or not so much, Ellen, for the board at the symposium?
No, I do. I think that's a really important context. I think it's really speaking to this tension that we have around how can we identify which entities are really in the business of being in the business as opposed to, say, a lifestyle choice, given that these are taxpayer dollars going for these entities. And so just sort of holding that tension and that balance and understanding that sometimes we don't know. Someone might start off as a lifestyle business, for instance, a farm or small forestry operation, and then get into it far enough and then be like, no, I really want to do this. So like, I'm just calling attention to this tension and something to just keep in mind, especially in the years when we have less grant money to work with, just how that might inform our thinking.
Elizabeth Nance also has her hand up. Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'm just curious, do we know why there's a jump in the loss at the 100 to 139?
I could make some assumptions, and I think just one that sticks out to me is when it comes time to file your taxes, just the example of being able to write off depreciation, the equipment on the larger farms costs a lot more and therefore is a larger write-off. Oftentimes we see those larger operations getting, they buy on a larger scale, so they get a better price. But there are many things that I think those that do the books could probably jump to as a conclusion and some of why the spike is there. The smaller you are, it is hard. It's rough to get through and actually have a net income and not a loss. There's a lot of things that are at play there. Donna?
Yeah, I was just curious if this is even including sugaring operations. Are they keeping track of the acreage and which ones become profitable?
Yeah, I was thinking about you, Donna, when I'm sharing these figures of wanting to actually look more closely at the maple specific numbers. Yeah, so I don't have an answer, and I've been thinking about like the way that the census represents the maple industry. I'm just sort of questioning it right now. How reflective it is of the industry, and what we might be able to derive from what is in the census that's maple specific.
It's not uncommon, Jake, is it, to see the forested land in the forested and not in the actual agriculture for maple, and the processing part is in the ag components. Is that true for the most part?
Yeah, so again, it's like making me curious just to check like maple specifically to see how like the land gets categorized, and some of these other numbers. It's a good question.
Yeah, you all just need to decide whether we're forestry or ag. We're tired of sitting on the fence.
That's right. I think one other thought that I have about this 100 to 139 is, and that jump is, I'm just curious too if this is like the lower end of livestock operations, where that their losses are likely just be higher because they're not quite at sufficient scale, and like it's you're less likely maybe to see like veg and berry and tree nut operations that fall into that 100 to 139 category. So it's maybe a little more representative of like smaller scale livestock that that's just challenging to be profitable at that size and acreage.
Sometimes too at that point, you see that it's a larger jump at the 100 to 139 and the net loss, and then you go to the net income. But sometimes we would see that owners would invest money into their businesses. They have off-farm income. And when they invest that money into the business to keep the expenses going out, just because of the way that your profit and loss and your balance sheet run, that money is not considered income, right? You're loaning it basically to your business. And so it makes your net loss look larger because you were working off the farm, but also trying to keep the money flowing and the expenses paid through the farm. So that last category, because the jump kind of makes me think that some of that could be relative.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think we should actually keep going.
Yeah. So
because I'm aware of time. You do have an extra 10 minutes, Jake, but I do want to get to
Okay.
like the
Yep.
the board, like the what's what. Yeah.
We're almost at the end here. Almost landing the plane. So yeah, I think actually this is the last slide here. So yeah, just one other way to look at this, you know, at a kind of broad and general level is net income by value of sales. And these are not averages per farm, but the total either net gains or net losses within that category. So these are in you know, so basically read these as millions. So farms that are selling less than $1,000, if you aggregate their net income, net losses, are generating $25 million of losses. Whereas, you know, farms that are reporting sales of over $1 million are in total generating $237 million of net income. And so the total across all of these is a total net income of 310 million. And 26% of farms account for the positive net income shown in this graph, and 2.6% of farms account for almost like basically 2/3 of the positive net income shown in this graph. So, you know, a really small number of farms generating the majority of net income that's being produced in Vermont. And I think the other, you know, this one is also very much, yeah, it's very clear in the delineation of where you would start to see net gains. So when sales, you know, start to hit the 25,000 to 49,000 level is, you know, where you could guess on average, you know, that farm is, or farms in that sales category are going to be generating a positive net income. And everything below that is not. So, you know, I think that's another indicator, and maybe this one kind of in a general sense is a better one than the prior slide, which is maybe more like commodity specific, where it's, you know, $25,000 is a very clear threshold when looking at this data. Yeah, so I decided to maybe emphasize reflections here because there is so much uncertainty, and it feels hard to give like hard recommendations to you all. But kind of accounting for that, you know, I was thinking about just there may not be an impact on working lands in the sense of like what you're seeing from applicants or the types of need, but just, you know, yeah, what effects and impacts will federal uncertainty have on this year's applicant pool and future years is one thing that I just want to pose to you all. You know, on the industry specific side, just something that, you know, we've started to observe through the various grant programs, and also I think over the history of working lands is like, you know, when an industry is mentioned or targeted as a priority, you see more applications from that industry, and that is in a sense a very obvious statement. But it just you know, thinking more and more about how does the board communicate priority, and sometimes there are things that may be said in a general way that people within an industry don't kind of read themselves into. And so I think it's not only kind of stating priorities, but maybe providing some examples of what the intent of those priorities is that, yeah, might speak to some of the variations across industries. So that's just one kind of general reflection. Something that on the kind of beef side that we've kind of observed and heard from in the network is that, you know, beef markets right now are generally very volatile. So there's really high calf prices and kind of low stock in the Midwest, and then probably tariffs are likely going to exacerbate supply shortages in the beef industry and cause those prices to increase, at least also increase beef prices in general on the consumer side. And so there's some Vermont producers, you know, we've made some shifts in our beef production model to be bringing in kind of feeder cows, you know, that are at a certain stage of growth. And those cows are more expensive now to purchase because people can now sell those on the livestock, you know, kind of brokerage market for pretty high amounts to larger packing houses who are looking for cow supply in essence. So yeah, there's just some real challenges, I think, to the business models of beef producers, and even like the movement to that was because cow-calf operations in Vermont are also very hard to operate profitably. And so with this too, you're gonna see generally demand for cheaper pork and poultry, and we're seeing that nationally. And I think some of the kind of sales figures here show some shifts to you know, for poultry. So the conditions are becoming more advantageous for pork and poultry producers. And then meat processing in general, I think value-added equipment, storage upgrades are in high demand, and you know, that value-added equipment, both from like a profitability and market demand perspective, and also from a labor standpoint of, you know, trying to introduce different types of efficiencies into production lines. You know, beyond large commodity milk, maple, poultry and eggs and vegetables, which we've talked a little bit about, you know, been the biggest growth areas. So what are the production, marketing, value-added opportunities for these two industries? What gaps in knowledge do we have about market opportunities that would help direct investments or guide, you know, producers in their pursuit of, you know, more market access and growth? You know, we have seen the changes and growth in some of the grain production acreage, and there is, you know, there's some new infrastructure being built out. Champlain Valley Grain Center, for example. There's established brands like Bean Crafters, and there's general consumer trends for plant proteins. So, you know, some of the conversations we've had within the network are like, what's inhibiting shifts in production of local production to meet kind of some of those trends and business growth, and you know, specialized equipment for growing, harvesting, sorting, and storing at scale is definitely required to make shifts in production for plant proteins and grains, and that paired obviously too with you know, strong TA, but it feels like the TA component is there, and you know, some of the, you know, there's some larger investments that need to be made to really shift and bring production at scale to grains. And then, you know, distribution, we don't talk a lot about, but you know, as we're investing in kind of middle of the supply chain, you know, IT, different information technologies for sales, inventory, and logistics is definitely an area of need to introduce efficiencies and, you know, operational, better operational management. Refrigerated delivery trucks is something we're seeing in demand. Diversifying and in some ways upgrading or keeping existing fleets up to par is another area of need. Even like smaller last mile delivery vehicles that require less maintenance, a little more nimble. Storage capacity, refrigerated and frozen in particular, and equipment for warehouse management and safety. So those are, yeah, just some of the, I think, general kind of trends and things that we're seeing that are getting discussed quite a bit in our network, and that I've tried to pull out and synthesize for you all.
Thank you, Jake. We have, if you can stay on, Jake, I know we started a little later, like we have
Yeah.
at least a few minutes for questions or, I think again, this is the time for board members to try to like share out loud, like, is there something that stood out to you, as far as when you start to think about like use of working lands funds, eligibility language, etc. Or just straight up questions for Jake.
Hey, Jake, would you feel comfortable emailing the slides to Elizabeth Sipple?
Yeah.
There's a few that I think our staff would really be interested in using. For instance, the reduction we see in acres each year in ag versus the slide that you showed by county with growth in each one. That's of interest to me for sure, and I hope to share it if you don't mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was a lot of information. Very good.
Yeah, it's
I mean, I guess I want to plant the seed for board members, like as you're thinking about this, like there's always the option for the board to say, in FY26, like even if we want to keep the eligibility open, you can say, there is specific board interest in, X, Y, Z types of projects, and we can also provide a rationale based on need. So, Jake highlighted distribution. The board could choose to say, the board is specifically interested in supporting, Jake, and I'm speaking to like you, the calling out, like it definitely encourages when people see their sector called out in a request for applications, it encourages those applications like that. I think we've seen very clearly. And I think that would be the same for like business stage, income level, or like, so I think those are the things that I'm thinking about, like leaving this presentation and I think are the things that sorry, go ahead, Jake.
Yeah, no, sorry for cutting in because it's hard. I think it's a difficult but necessary conversation, and just knowing that there's certain factors that on average you can kind of predict like profitability, or knowing that certain industries like have good opportunity. And I've heard from some folks who are like, we don't apply anymore because it just doesn't feel like it's actually like for us, and like and so I just wonder around like some even established businesses that are doing well, like if they're not pursuing working lands grants anymore because they may have a perception of like, oh, it's meant for some certain types of farms or scale, and just how does that get addressed in the RFP and communications language? Like it's something I'm curious about. I don't, I'm like, this is like anecdotally, but it does feel like something that deserves some consideration in kind of the communication components.
And just out of curiosity, Jake, are you hearing this from large farms or small farms? Because in data, we actually fund early stage, majority growth stage, and some like maturity stage. And we also, you know, in Vermont, by the federal definition, like almost all farms are small farms. Like there's
Right.
very few LFOs. Like,
Yeah.
but just like who do you hear? Is there like, is it
Yeah,
small or large or
I would put it in the like,
like Vermont large?
yeah, exactly. Like farms in Vermont that maybe, they aren't large by definition, but see themselves as like being more mature.
Mm-hmm.
And also some of those farms have maybe like, came about in a culture where these grants weren't available to them, and they're kind of like, it's not, not something that I need or I'm going to pursue. So, I think there's probably a couple different factors, but but again, like, it just, I think it kind of speaks to like how precise are the priorities around some of these factors of like viability and scale and like likelihood of being profitable. Like those are all really hard questions and things to discuss, but I think they are relevant.
I mean, we see demand, you know, outpacing availability, significantly, 5 times in the last 2 years, at least 5 times the demand than the available funding. So we know that there's going to be, or our understanding is that there's also an increase in, I don't want to say disgruntled, but like, folks who had a very solid application and didn't receive funding. And then, they, the feedback is provided, but sometimes, the truth is that the project was good and it just like, wasn't selected for like, sort of a landscape level reason.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the board, that's where more like sort of stated priorities of sectors, like based on landscape need, might be useful. But then, the board is always concerned about then discouraging very innovative, like important projects that like aren't within those sectors. I mean, I'm speaking like to you as a board as like what I hear as the program manager. Like that's the conversation, especially for board members who haven't been part of the budgeting process. Like there's often this tension between we want to keep it open, that that results in a lack of clarity for applicants around priorities, and then also sometimes a desire to be more specific around eligibility based on landscape needs.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say I mean, if you had $3 million versus 1 million, some of these conversations are easier to have and money's easier to prioritize for different needs. So I don't want to discount, like it's challenging with very limited resources to get all this right.
Yeah, with more money, we could kind of do both. We could have like very targeted funding and sort of the open, and you really can't do that with $1 million. You have to.
Thank you, Jake, for joining us. I appreciate the presentation, and if anyone has any questions, now's your opportunity. Otherwise, we will dismiss Jake and let him get back to work. I don't see any hands.
I gotta go over to House Ag at 1 o'clock. So
good luck. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. And let me know if you have other questions, or I'm interested in looking at some of that maple stuff, Donna. So maybe I'll have some more to report back on that.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Take care.
Yeah.
You bet.
All right, bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jake.
So that was great. A lot of information. So we're going to talk symposium, correct? And then I believe that's the only thing left, right?
Yeah, that's it. And it's you know, and it, because, you know, Ellen, I don't think you were able to complete your update, right? In the pre-Jake. That would
Yeah,
be the
no,
only.
I think we're all good. And
Okay.
Jake is gonna be leading a group of the food hubs and businesses connected to the middle of the supply chain to House Ag as a hour and a half long information session to them. So very highly relevant, and I need to go over there as well. So I think unless anybody has some questions for me, I think I covered what I wanted to
Okay.
share.
Then I think I can give a 5-minute update, and I am going to ask for some input. So the, you know, the symposium update itself is we have gone with the June 16th and April 20th, I mean, August, not April, 26th dates based on the survey. We are honing in on locations, which I think both are going to be great locations. So, you know, more information once those are 100% coming your way. But I think my question to you all, to the board, is we heard from 2 important stakeholders today. We're going to hear from Vida and the manager of the trade show assistance grants in May. I really would like to know if there's anybody else that you all want to hear from prior to the budget prioritization process, and we might be able to have like one of those presenters at the symposium time-wise, but it would really be like probably one. But it's important for me that I have, yeah, your feedback on making sure you're hearing from, or that the full board is hearing from folks that you feel they should be hearing from to make informed decisions about, you know, these limited but important funds. So that's my question to you all, is if there's anybody else that you would like the board to be hearing from. Alex? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm not quite sure who that person is in the forestry and logging space, but you know, the professional logging contractors might be an interesting one to hear from, or on the sort of sawmill or wood product side, you know, somebody in that space. I assume that higher level, it's probably an association, as opposed to an individual kind of person, but that would be, I think, really valuable because the focus is obviously heavy to ag and the forestry and logging world. We could use a little more, I think, learning and focus.
So maybe I will connect with you, Bob, and then Alex, I'll probably connect with you offline about like who, because that's not a group that I've worked with. So like who that would be, and what we might be able to expect them, like what the ask could be to them. But so we will connect. Bob?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest Sam Lincoln and his role is in the PLC.
Okay.
You know, he knows the board inside and out. He knows
Yeah.
our.
Because he was the FPR designee, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Chris?
I would
And then
also
Donna.
recommend the Vermont Forest Products Association, maybe Colleen Goodrich.
What about somebody from the sugaring world? I mean, just to find out what the general needs are in Maple.
So who would that be, Donna?
You could maybe start with the Vermont Sugar Makers Association. Allison Hope is pretty much in tune with at least those that are members of the organization.
So Allison Hope.
Yeah, I
Who's
can
that?
get you contact information.
Okay, that would be great.
Elizabeth, I wonder if what we're working towards is inviting a handful of associations from various sectors for them to give us just a summary of what's going on. So from the produce realm, that would be the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association. I think we're at something like 800 members. But I don't know how that we would refine that list in terms of who comes to the table.
Yeah, because if we're going now sector by sector, that is a bigger, like we kind of been having like these network, like hoping that sector needs come out of the networks. Okay. And maybe yeah. Well, let me think. I mean, I think Vermont Veg and Berry is unique in its size and okay. Great. I think, Allison, that is it. If we want to take a vote to adjourn.
It's great. Excellent. Thank you all for your input and staying on task with us today. It's a lot of information. I am looking for a motion to adjourn, should you wish.
I move we adjourn.
Thank you, Donna. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much, Alex. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries and you may be dismissed. Thank you all. Appreciate you,
you.
Elizabeth Chadwick. Thanks for participating. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Yeah.